know, there's a little mystery I want to share. If you went to my office, in the center of the carpet, you would find a deep indentation. It's quite moist. And I want to give you 3 clues what caused it. First, it started to occur just a few weeks ago. Second, the shape is about the same size and shape of my body curled up in the fetal position. And I think that the moisture are my tears. This was the most difficult thing I've ever done preparing this talk. And if I can get meta for a moment and talk about putting together this talk, I've taught for 10 years, and I have done professional development for a living, and I had a real efficient system for putting together presentations. However, doing a talk in this format, like, all bets were off because it's so different. I had lots of efficient tools for applying everything I had learned, but here, I'm going to talk with you all about effective pedagogy, and I'm going to do that by lecturing, and I totally get the irony of that. And I worry for my faculty members in grad school who would say, like, where's all the stuff I taught you? Where's the engaged pedagogy? Where's the constructivist learning? I'm not going to do any of that, so I feel really bad. I also want to note that in putting together this talk, I face new challenges. Like, how am I going to do this different type of talk, given that all my tools that I've honed over the years don't apply? And I think this is a form of something which we would call transfer. Now, transfer, quite simply, is a situation where what is learned in one point in time influences performance at a later point in time. There's lots of different ways we can parse this. We can think about near transfer. So if I learn how to add numbers on a worksheet, I can add numbers on a test. That's near transfer. It's quite similar. There's something called far transfer, where if I learn about airflow by building a windmill, can I apply that for building a better sail for a sailboat? Conditions are quite different. Ultimately, I say as educators, what we really are striving for is far transfer. We want our students to apply everything they've learned in our classrooms outside of the classroom walls and to stretch this throughout their lives. So that's what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about the why, the what, and the how of transfer. So starting with the why do we want to focus on transfer? If we think about our kids today, I love this quote, "We are currently preparing students for jobs that don't yet exist, using technologies that haven't been invented in order to solve problems we don't even know are problems yet." Like, that's a really profound and huge challenge that we face, and it's clearly going to require some transfer. Now, Kathy Davidson, who works with MacArthur's Digital Media and Learning Initiative, she noted that of today's grade school students, 65% of them will take on jobs that don't exist today. So when I look at one ad today and I see stuff like you'll see on the screen, I'm not sure of any of you, but how many were little kids that I can't wait to someday I become a blogger? Or how many said, like, I'm going to dress up for Halloween as a social media strategist? Like, it didn't exist. And so our job is not to prepare our students for these jobs, of course, because these are all going to change. We need to prepare them for the jobs of the future. That's another opportunity for transfer. So what's the what? What do we want to make sure that students have? Now, all of you, for a moment, think about a really challenging problem that you took on and you were able to solve, successfully solve, and you go, I can't believe I have no idea how I did that. I want you to think about that. For me, I hope to say this 14 minutes and 41 seconds from now. Just letting you know that. Okay, so you have this problem. Now, if we were to poll all of you and find out what are the common elements, what cuts across all the ways that you solve this, my hunch is it'd be a series of skills and dispositions. So you had some content knowledge. You had to know something. You had to have some critical thinking and problem-solving skills. You needed to be able to collaborate with others. You need to communicate with one another. You need to learn how to learn, especially when there's a challenge you didn't know how to face. And you had to maintain what we call an academic mindset. This is the idea that we're not either good or bad at something, but we can get better through hard work. Now, there's lots of terms for this. We might call this 21st century skills. I work at the Hewlett Foundation, and we call this deeper learning. So it's just a shorthand to refer to this set of skills. I have a hunch that all of these you were using in terms of solving your problems. So these are not new ideas. There's a survey done of Fortune 500 companies back in 1970, and they asked them to identify what skills they're looking for in new employees. And you see them ranked here. So at the top, writing and computational skills and reading skills are the most important. Now I'm going to highlight what we might call the deeper learning skills, and you see where those are rated back in 1970. Now they re-administered this survey in the 90s, again to Fortune 500 companies, and you can see how the list shifts. Now those skills are now jumped up to the top, so this is what folks are looking for. And I've seen more recent research which emphasizes this still again. The concern is this is what companies are looking for. However, in education, we're not always delivering this, and this is a real challenge for our country. Now, what happens with our teachers? This is not the case that teachers blithely disregard this. Like, we all know this is important. Now, the overall logic, if we ask why do we need to learn something like geography, Built into our system is this idea that you're learning something in a class. It's going to help you pass some sort of assessments because that measures what's valued. And eventually, this will help you out on the job, taking on different challenges. So we have this process in place. Now, sometimes with teachers, we might even tell our students in the most abstract terms. Why am I learning this? You're going to learn this because it's going to help you to be a well-rounded person, so you're super educated, so someday you can solve problems in the future. Without ever connecting those dots, like how is that going to happen? And the fact that there's so much belief in this, just blind belief in this, sometimes I worry that education, even public education, it might be the largest faith-based institution in the world. So we need to unpack this. Now, there's some research done by the National Research Council, and they try to understand transfer and what causes that. And what they determined is that the transfer process that we see is really driven by deeper learning. So near transfer, being able to transfer something more closely, and far transfer, deeper learning are the skills that matter in terms of making that happen. So we need to attend to that. There's a puzzle, though. There's a lot of researchers have been trying to understand transfer, and they find very little evidence of it actually occurring. However, we know it does because we've all taken on problems and we've all solved them. So there's this mystery that we need to uncover. Now I want to turn to the how. How does transfer occur? And if you look in the literature, there's a lot of different ways that they parse it. So they're going to talk about literal versus figurative, or lateral versus vertical, or nonspecific versus specific. And I have no idea why they use such arcane academic terms when there's something so much more immediate that can explain the differences. And that, of course, would be spies. So let me tell you about 007 spies and how this relates to transfer. Now, those of you familiar with James Bond movies, you know typically at the beginning of the movie, Q will provide James with a series of devices. So X-ray glasses, maybe a wristwatch that shoots a laser, maybe a fountain pen that explodes. And then what we do in the movie is we watch to see how he deploys that device in order to solve a problem. You walk into an embassy, you need to destroy it, you use the exploding fountain pen, ta-da, then you're done. Okay, this is looking forward. I'm going to give you something and you're going to use it in the future. That's one form of transfer. I'm going to contrast this with a second form of transfer. And this, so you can use this in solving your own problems. I'm going to contrast this against MacGyver transfer. Now, in MacGyver, he wasn't given a set of tools to deploy. Instead, he would face an unexpected problem on the spot. He had to figure out how to solve that using whatever was around. So if he needed to create an explosion, he would say, all right, I have some cold medicine and a chocolate bar and a paper clip. I'm going to make a bomb. So he was drawing backwards from everything he knew before in order to solve the current problem. So two different ways of thinking about transfer, one going forward and one going backwards. So if you think about the problem that you identified, you can probably trace backwards and see what were the elements that I drew upon in order to solve that problem. Now, in terms of assessment, how do we reconcile these? 007 approach, if we look for particular learning, how it influences a future performance, and then for MacGyver, we see how we can look at a current performance and go backwards to see what led to it. Now, this helps to explain that mystery. Why did we find so little evidence of transfer? Because it's really hard to know in advance what skill, what knowledge is going to be useful sometime in the future. So if we're tracking something forward, like James Bond's fountain pen, it might not ever get deployed. This is still a useful way to look at this, but we also want to look backwards. So we want to look forward and backward. So let me give you an example on the ground so you can see how this plays out. Now, this is an assessment that I created, and it's called Crazy Carrots. And this was used in elementary schools. And the setup here was that your friend Jose has planted some carrot seeds and is now harvesting them. And some of them turned out completely normal, and some turned out like the ones you see up on the screen. He's trying to figure out why. And he's identified three possible hypotheses. First, it could be that there was radiation that affected the seeds because the seeds were left near a microwave. That's the first guess. Second, maybe it's because the seeds were planted too close together. And third, maybe there's something strange about where the seeds were planted. So the students need to figure out what's the most reasonable explanation based on the evidence, and then write a letter back to Jose explaining this and saying whether or not you think it's safe to eat these carrots. Now, there's no right or wrong answer in this. We really want to understand how the students transferred their knowledge. So let me tell you about the materials we gave the students. I did this in conjunction with a teacher in a large public school in an urban district. So we gave them some information about how lemon seeds that are exposed to gamma rays might turn out fruit that looks like what you see up on the screen. Gamma rays are stronger than X-rays, which are stronger than microwaves. This might help to rule out the idea of radiation. The students did not have any prior instruction on radiation, but this is open for them to understand. We also gave them the instructions from the carrot seed package. And there it says plant the seeds at least 2 inches apart. You want to make sure that they are in sun, but shade would be okay. And also, you want to make sure that they're in soft, loose soil. That's what the seed instructions tell us. Next, we gave them an image of the garden plot, and there's an old part and a new part. The new part, which we've never planted seeds in before, it's under a tree, and it's kind of rocky if we zoom in and look at the soil. Next, we give them a layout of the garden, and here we see the garden is 2 feet by 1 foot. And here's where the students might be able to do some direct near transfer of their math skills because they have been instructed on math. They can calculate the seeds were at least 2 inches apart, so that shouldn't be a particular issue here. We see the new part of the garden towards the bottom, which is under the shade of a tree. And then finally, this is a layout of where those crazy carrots emerged. The orange carrots were the normal carrots, and the yellow carrots were the strange ones. Now, because they're under the tree, that might be of a concern. However, we learned from the seed packet that shade really doesn't matter so much. Maybe it was the rocky soil. So again, no right or wrong answer here. So in the assessment we gave with the students, we really want to see in James Bond 007 style, did the students apply their mathematical skills? Did they calculate how far the seeds were apart? We also wanted to have them use their MacGyver skills. What prior learning influenced their answers? And also, how did they use new information? Because they're introduced to things that weren't part of their instruction in the class. How do they pull this all together? And finally, what deeper learning competencies were employed as they came up with these answers, and was the transfer productive or not? Because just because you bring in new information, that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right information to use, so how can we unpack that? Now, how we did this with the students wrote back to Jose and gave their explanation, and then the teacher wrote back to the students in Jose's voice to ask additional questions so we could really understand what they were transferring in, what their issues were. So I'm going to share with you 4 examples of student work. And I want you to think about these questions. What do you learn about their transfer? Don't look for the right or wrong answer, but what are they bringing to the occasion, and how are they trying to solve this problem and use the new information? So the first piece is from Kendra. She writes, Dear Jose, I found 2 answers to your question. One answer was that the seeds need sun, not shade. Okay, trying to make sense of that. And our second answer is that they need to be 2 inches apart, so doing some math skills. So you can see what she was doing there. When asked if you should eat the carrot, she said, no, you should not because you will vomit and feel sick. So apparently she was transferring in prior knowledge about vomit. Okay, second question, person from Yamilet. She writes, Dear Jose, I think the carrots didn't come out good because that part needed some sunlight and it was too windy. Now, nowhere in the materials were wind brought up. So we can ask some questions. Why do you think wind comes into play? But I think you can eat it, just make sure they're clean. Okay, again, some prior knowledge, how does that come into play? So again, you can think about what she's transferring in and how she's making sense of new information. Next one, this is from Daisy. Dear Jose, I think the carrots turned that way because maybe you put the seeds too close together. The same thing happened to my aunt's carrots. So how does a student reconcile what they've learned in a book, what they learned in material, and their lived experience with their aunt's carrots? Again, an interesting question to unpack the transfer. I also think that the carrots need sunlight, but they're good to eat, and you just need to be careful when you eat them. Okay, so again, making sense of that. And finally, the last one, this is from Rosemary. Dear Jose, maybe you planted them in a different area where you planted them in the area where you planted something else. Deeply dug sandy garden soil enriched with compost are best for growing carrots. Basically, you want deep, loose soil. Please don't eat those crazy carrots. Okay. Again, there's lots of different reactions, but rather than looking for the right or wrong answer, we're looking for what was transferred in. It was a really great exercise. The students, these were all English language learners, they got really immersed in this project, so much so that one student wrote, Dear Jose, I think you're my new best friend, which is sweet and sad. Okay, so now I want to talk about teaching and learning and the applications for what we can do. So one strategy is try to improve efficiency. So if we know the types of challenges we want our students to take on in the future, we can make classroom work closer to that. So make it approximate what they really are going to do in the future. This way they get routines, they can become more efficient. That's one piece. The second strategy is to try to enhance creativity. So give our students incredibly novel problems for them to solve and figure out what do they transfer in, what prior knowledge do they bring with them as they try to solve this. And of course, this isn't an either or. Students need both sets of skills. We want to make sure we use both strategies with them. Ultimately, the 007 approach gives students a chance to practice, so problem solving becomes routine. The MacGyver approach gives them opportunities to take on novel problems so they can learn to be innovative. So now what? What do we do with all of this? Now, what you can do, you can focus on transfer, not just right or wrong answers, but see what in particular are they applying from one problem to another, or you drawing on past knowledge to solve future problems. That's one thing you can do. And specifically, you can look at student work both from the 007 as well as the MacGyver perspectives. You can focus on deeper learning competencies and how those enable the transfer, how that helped them to do that or not do that. And then think about if the transfer was productive. Find a way to encourage what really worked well. Find ways to take away what makes failure persistent. Now, I do want to sum up finally, as we think about transfer and keeping our spy hats in mind, you might be questioning, like, do I really have lots of opportunities to apply and use transfer myself? And I do want to note, sometimes, here's a question, if you stand back and squint, do you ever wonder if opportunities for transfer have always been staring right at you? Because I think maybe they have been. What do you think? Think you might? Thank you.